Well, Chris Popper joined here by Dr. Marc Gousse in the Superintendent's office at AOS 91. And since we last talked, great news, the union contract with the teachers has been resolved, and that's a great thing to be put in the past.
Great news. I'm really pleased for our teachers, our community, our schools. It's really welcome news.
So that, if I remember, it's a 3-year contract.
Yes.
That gives some nice peace and.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's great to have it resolved, but I think moving forward, we want to work together in advance of the next cycle to build on some positive work.
Okay. One of the things that when you arrived here 3 years ago, I think.
Well, but I've been here too, so I'm working on my third year.
Okay.
Right.
Was you went on a listening tour and then wanted to do some long-range planning, which was something that the board had asked you to take upon. Mm-hmm. And so now you've done the listening, you've been out in the communities, and now you're at the point where committees are being formed, mm-hmm. and you need the public's help and input in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, as we're talking about, to acknowledge what it is and what it isn't. Yes, we've done some listening tours and tried to solicit feedback through surveys. What we've learned at this point is, speaking to residents, parents, staff, administrators, board members, folks aren't looking for an RSU. And so this is not a design to form a single system. If that's the direction folks want to go, we haven't heard that.
Okay.
Not to say that's not down the road.
And there's a big difference between an AOS and an RSU.
And I should say RSU, Regional School Unit,
right.
as opposed to AOS, Alternative Organizational Structure. What we are and what we have, folks, what we've heard, are comfortable with. However, there are several things that we do, the way we're structured, that aren't necessarily the most productive and the most efficient. And there's no question, if we look at the data in terms of how our students perform, the staff that we have, our schools, that we have outstanding schools, no question. The data supports that. But there are a number of identified inefficiencies or redundancies in our structure. I'll give you a few for instances. One that is not a consideration, but people may or may not know that we pass 10 budgets, and we go through 10 audits, and we go through 10 warrants. That's a function of who we are as an AOS, and that's how we do business. But there are other pieces that we could consider. And so I'll give you a few examples. Food service. We have outstanding food service programs in all of our schools, fresh fruits and vegetables, greenhouses. But I don't believe we've even scratched the surface about how we could do menu planning and bulk purchasing and professional development. Similarly, with our custodial maintenance staffs, we are all independent units within schools. So if somebody is hurt or sick or we can't get a substitute, we really can't replace those folks the way we're presently structured. So we don't have a pool of people that we can tap into when we have a gap to fill.
So in other words, if someone is sick here at MDI High School, you couldn't bring someone over from Trenton easily to fill in?
No, not officially. We can't do it. Could we do it? Let me just say this. Our people are amazing. If there's a water leak or something that happens, they come and they support one another informally.
Right.
But we don't have a formal process to do that. And oftentimes in our support staffing positions and some of our teaching positions, they either go unfilled or we can't find qualified people because it's a limited pool. And that's beyond our AOS.
Right.
So I think it's important to look at options that communities and boards could consider to build upon the success that we have now. Another area, Chris, is transportation. When you watch the buses roll, the buses roll out, you will see a number of buses that are not filled to their capacity.
Right.
And we have buses that roll through communities to get to their destination that could conceivably drop students and or pick them up. And that's fuel, that's drivers, that's resources. We don't presently use routing software that could assist with that. So these are just considerations that other folks have identified, board members have identified. So we owe the communities the due diligence to look at those pieces and bring options. The other pieces that are being considered are middle level education. We have outstanding K-8 schools, but oftentimes we may not run a program, academic, extracurricular program, because there aren't enough students in that particular location to run that program. Or enrichment programs, students that might be accelerated in mathematics or arts, or they're limited by there's no question that small schools are outstanding for kids in terms of relationships and knowing the students. But this high school 50 years ago is an example of consideration for middle level programming.
Right.
And I would say in the research I've done, the conversation was 20 years to bring about Mount Desert Island High School. And it was 20 years because there were, I believe, 4 different high schools. Each community had their own. And so there are parallel conversations and considerations. But at the end of the day, I've yet to find the person that doesn't feel strongly about the academic and the extracurricular programming at Mount Desert Island High School. It's outstanding.
Right.
So again, I think we owe it to our students and our communities to consider, is there a better way to do middle level programming? And not to say that bigger is better, but are there ways to combine some programs or resources? Is that a combined middle school? Is that 2 middle schools? Or is it keeping it the way it is? So many of these questions we'd like to drill down deeper with community input, with staff input. There is no conceived plan. There's no hidden agenda. It's about dialogue with communities to say, what is best for our kids and how can we maximize our resources?
All right, so which committees are you looking to fill right now?
Middle level. I've mentioned middle level. Support staff, educational technicians, transportation, food service. There's also a calendar committee, which is kind of an offshoot, but think about it, Chris. We've been doing
the school calendar is probably one of the most hotly debated questions that comes up. Are you going to start before Labor Day? Are you going to start after Labor Day? Are we going to go? When is Christmas vacation? When is February vacation? Although that's somewhat tied in.
Yeah.
But snow days. I mean, all of that goes into building the committee and to the calendar.
Yes.
And it impacts every family, every business on the island.
And that is
off the island.
And that's one of the major considerations for school committees. The school committee sets the calendar. But as you probably know, if you think about it, why do we have the calendar we do? It's an agrarian calendar. And it was built on a model of education 150, 180 years ago. And that's just, it's a function of that piece. And I think it's time for us to look at all those variables you mentioned and some others. What is best for teaching and learning? But it does have an impact with parents, with students, with businesses, with the communities, and we have to be sensitive to that. We also have to be sensitive to the fact that we have to work with our neighbors regionally, because we are required by state law to have no less than 5 uncommon days with schools that feed into Hancock County Technical Center.
Oh.
So that's a consideration.
Right. Okay.
So those are the major themes and the major committees. What the school committee has tasked us with doing is form subcommittees. We are soliciting input from the community now, staff, to fill these subcommittees. There's no attendance requirement. We recognize people are busy, but we'd like to make sure that people that are going to come on board are committed to doing this work. And if they can't make the meetings, they're certainly welcome to provide feedback and input. From there, I would envision the committees meeting over the course of the next couple of months and then providing some feedback and recommendations for the AOS school committee to consider for potential next steps. And that timeline, although it sounds somewhat accelerated, remember, we've been doing this work for 2 years, and if there are some recommendations that would have considerations for the budget, we need to be prepared to do that in this cycle for FY20.
So, how often are the committees going to meet? I mean, you know, if you're talking about 2 to 3 months, is it weekly meetings? Is it bi-weekly? Or
that hasn't been yet determined.
Okay.
And one of the pieces I will say to you is we're going to hold a workshop with the boards and the board members. The board members will facilitate and co-facilitate and lead these discussions. I and other administrators will be resources and be part of it. But at the end of the day, I really can't say that one committee will be limited to meeting weekly and another. It's really going to be determined by the makeup of the committee. I think they need to have an initial meeting and establish what's going to be best for that work group.
there could therefore be subcommittees of a committee.
It could be.
Right.
I'll give you the example. If we're really committed to including our staff, which we are, these meetings are going to happen either afternoons or evenings. And one board member even suggested we did a workshop on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And do you do 2 or 3 afternoon meetings, or do you hold a half-day workshop on a Saturday? And that's a possibility too. So they're not limited by any template. I think it'll look different for a number of people depending on the makeup of the group.
So how do people volunteer to serve on the subcommittees?
So there should be an article coming out in the Islander this week, and thank you for the opportunity to bring this forward. There's a letter on the MDI RSS website. Okay. It's right on the front page, and they can contact me, Marc Gousse, Superintendent of Schools, Marc.Gousse at mdirss.org, or they can telephone 207-288-5049. They can certainly email. They can call the office, speak with Selena, but we'll put them on the list.
Okay. And if people, they don't necessarily have to have a level of expertise. You just want community members to have input into
right.
these subcommittees.
Correct. You don't have to be a teacher, you don't have to be a board member, you don't have to be an administrator, and you certainly don't have to be a transportation director or a chef.
Right. And if you don't have children in schools, you're still welcome to participate.
Absolutely. I mean, the community is made up of all entities, and we want all input and feedback. And to that point, if folks don't have the time to serve, we would welcome their feedback and suggestions.
Okay.
And we will report out, the board will report out findings and recommendations.
All right. So your chance to have input into the long-range planning, many of the subcommittees, and all you have to do is email Dr. Gousse, and we'll have a link where you can do that right in the article.
Thanks, Chris. Right. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Check out all the other videos we have on the WDEA YouTube channel.